Hello, students. I'm Sam, sir, and we are in the fifth chapter of geography textbook, and the chapter's name is Minerals and Energy Resources. Minerals are homogeneous, naturally occurring substances with a definable internal structure, and minerals are substances that are formed naturally in the earth. They are usually solids, inorganic, have a crystalline shape, structure, and formed naturally by geological processes. A mineral can be made of single chemical element, or usually there are more than one uh, chemical elements found in it. They may have different colors, they may have different textures, they may have different levels of hardness. We all know that the very hard substance known to mankind is diamond, and talc is a mineral which is very soft. Rocks often have minerals in them, and this may be only one example when we talking about limestone. It contains only compounds of calcium, or they may be more than one. Many of them are sometimes combined together. The science knows more than 2000 minerals which have been identified, but only a few are abundantly found in the rocks. Now, which mineral will be found in the rock depends on the physical and chemical conditions under which the igneous or metamorphic rock was formed. This results in variety of colors, hardness, crystal forms, luster, and density. Now, geologists use these properties to classify the minerals. They classify them according to the colors, hardness, crystal forms, luster, and density. And secondly, they classify them according to the content. Now, here's a broad classification of the minerals. Broadly, we have the metallic minerals, non-metallic minerals, and the energy minerals. In metallic minerals, we have either ferrous or non-ferrous or precious metals. Ferrous metals means which contain iron, or they have properties similar to iron. If you look at the periodic table, you will often find these elements closely grouped together. Now, iron, manganese, nickel, and cobalt are known as ferrous elements, minerals. The non-ferrous are, they are very metallic in nature, but they do not have the properties similar to iron. They are copper, lead, tin, and bauxite. From bauxite, aluminum is taken out. In precious metals, we have gold, silver, platinum. There's one more, palladium, and you'll often, if you check the periodic table, they are grouped together. These four are neighbors of each other. In non-metals, we have mica, salt, potash, sulfur, granite, limestone, marble, sandstone, etc. In the energy minerals, we have the prominent one, that is coal. Petroleum is the next important mineral, and natural gas, etc. Now, if a rock contains a large percentage of any mineral, such a rock is known as an ore. So, ores are rocks containing valuable minerals. The term valuable does not mean value only in rupees. There are different minerals having different values, scientific also. Now, ore is a natural rock or sediment that contains one or more valuable minerals, typically metals, that can be mined, treated, and sold at a profit. Ore is extracted from the earth through mining and treated or refined, often through smelting. These are the names of processes to extract the valuable metals or minerals. Now, the type of formation or the structure in which they are found determines the relative ease with which mineral ores may be mined. Gold, being a noble metal, Noble means that it does not react easily with other elements. So the elemental gold is often found just like that in the yellow metal. The more reactive metals are found in combined states, and the more reactive a metal is, the more difficult it is to extract that and purify it. Now, this determines what determines the ease with which they can be extracted. This determines the cost of extraction, and it reflects on the cost of the mineral. Now, let me say, even though gold um, is easy to extract, it's easy to purify, but the proportion of gold in earth is less. First of all, that is the availability is less, the supply is less, and the demand is more. That is the reason why gold is more costly. There are often there are other elements which are costlier than gold, but it's not having a demand in the jewelry market. So that's a major factor of the determination of cost. Now, in about occurrence of minerals, first of all, they are found in igneous and metamorphic rocks. Igneous rocks, you know that in the mantle of the earth, the temperature is as high as 2400 degrees Celsius, and many minerals and many metals are at such a high temperature in molten form. And during volcanic activities or during tectonic activities, these liquid this molten liquid is known as magma, and it oozes out, it comes out, and when it comes out through a volcano, we call it a lava. And when it cools down, it forms igneous rocks, often metamorphic rocks. Although metamorphic rocks may be of sedimentary origin, if they change because of the high pressure and high temperature inside the mantle of the earth, they change their form. And often these minerals are associated with this igneous and metamorphic rocks. And when they come out, usually you find them at the cracks and crevices, faults and joints. Now, if the occurrences are small and if it is longish, we call them as veins. Or if the occurrence is large and if there are lumps, we call them lodes. Notice the spelling of load is different. It's LODE, not LOADE. Now, they are formed when minerals in molten states are forced upwards through cavities towards the Earth's surface. They cool and solidify as they rise. And examples of such minerals which come out in this form is tin, copper, lead, zinc, etc. Now, children belonging to Sapphire House, you need to be, no, sorry, this is Emerald. So, Emerald House students feel happy. The green color is because of the metal chromium and +3 oxidation state. The second place where they occur is in the sedimentary rocks. They occur in beds or layers. And you already know that sedimentary rocks are formed in layers. Wherever there's a deposition and accumulation and concentration, it happens in horizontal layers. Coal and forms of iron ore get concentrated being under great heat and pressure for long duration. Coal is a good example of mineral which is found in sedimentary rocks, because millions of years ago, when vegetation got pressed under the crust of earth, and it changed its form, the carbons converted into hydrocarbons, and that we call as fossil fuels. Coal is mostly, it's fully, almost fully carbon. Now, some sedimentary minerals form due to evaporation also, especially in the arid regions. Just like in Rajasthan, you have this place Tal Chapar, you have the Sambar Lake, and because of evaporation, you have the sodium chloride, the common salt or the rock salt that we eat. Similar is the process of formation of gypsum and potash salt. This is rock salt, so commonly consumed in Rajasthan. The next process of occurrence is by decomposition of the surface rocks and removal of soluble constituents leave the residual mass of weathered material containing ores. Bauxite is one such ore which is formed by this process, and bauxite is aluminum hydroxide. It can be converted into aluminum oxide, which can be reduced to metallic aluminum. They also occur as alluvial deposits wherever there is flowing water. Alluvium gets deposited, and the alluvium gets deposited in the V-shaped valley flows at the base of the hills. These deposits are called placer deposits, and they generally contain minerals which does not get corroded by water. Example is gold and silver, tin and platinum. They do not get corroded by water, and they can be found in such valley flows as placer deposits. This is an example of vein deposit, VEIN vein, which we just talked about. This is gold as veins of gold in cracks and crevices. The ocean water also contains vast quantities of minerals. But because the ocean is so big, these minerals are very weakly diffused to be of economic significance. But still, we have some minerals which are extracted from seawater. Example is common salt, magnesium, bromine. They are derived largely from the ocean waters. And ocean beds are rich in manganese nodules. These are as big as a cricket ball. This nodule, which you can see on the right hand side. Remember, magnesium is different and manganese is different. Both are different metals, different properties. Now, India developed the technology to collect these nodules from the ocean floor. So, India has got the exclusive right to collect the manganese nodules from the ocean floor. And here is a setup developed by India. You can see the manganese nodules on the ocean floor, and this contraption collects the manganese nodules, and then it's taken to the surface of Earth from below the ocean. There's a type of mining, it's a small scale mining, it's known as rat hole mining. This is common in Meghalaya. Now, these mines are so small that only a child can crawl through. So, because of the small size, they are known as rat holes, and often ores like iron ore, some minerals like coal and limestone and dolomite are extracted from here. And do you know that most of the minerals in India are nationalized, and their extraction is possible only after obtaining due permission from the government? But these tribal areas, this is like a theft. They quietly take it out without anybody knowing. Now the distribution of minerals is very unevenly distributed. Some areas are rich in mineral resources, some are very poor. The peninsular rock contains most of the reserves of coal, metallic minerals, mica, and some non-metallic minerals. Then the western and eastern coasts have the sedimentary rocks, have most of the petroleum deposits. Example on the western coast is Bombay High, or known as now Mumbai High, and on the eastern coast we have the oil wells in Assam. On western coast we also have Ankaleshwar in Gujarat, which is also an important producer of petroleum oil. Now, Rajasthan, with the rock systems of the peninsula, has reserves of many non-ferrous minerals. Now, let's look at the distribution again. The alluvial plains are mostly without minerals of economic importance. It's not that they are without minerals, but the minerals found there are not economically important. The reason for these variations is because the difference in geological structure, processes, and time involved in the formation of the minerals. Remember that it takes millions of years, really, it takes millions of years for formation of minerals. Now, from the economic point of view, the minerals will become viable if the concentration of the mineral is high enough in an ore, and if there's an ease of access, extraction, and enrichment, and if it is near to the market. Now, if large amount of ores which fulfill these conditions are found, they are classified as mines. They are not just deposits and reserves. Mines can be means that they can be extracted and utilized for uh, selling. The ferrous minerals account for about 75% of the total value of the production of metallic minerals, and they provide a strong base for the development of metallurgical industries. Many of the metallurgical industries are directly depending on these minerals. For example, the steel industry in India. India exports substantial quantities after it meets her own internal demand. And the figure for the year 2019, that is last year, was an export of over 900 billion rupees. That's a lot of money. Now, these are the two popular ores of iron. On the left hand side is hematite, that is Fe2O3, contains 70% of iron, and sorry, this is between 50 and 60% of iron. And the one on the right hand side is magnetite, that is Fe3O4. Iron, as you know, has got different oxidation states. So we have Fe2O3 and Fe3O4. And magnetite is a richer ore, although it's available in nature in lesser quantity. It contains 70%, up to 70% of iron. And magnetite can attract magnet. That's why the name. Now, iron ore is a basic mineral and important for industrial development, and India has a good quality reserve of iron ores. Magnetite has a higher iron content of about 70%. It has excellent magnetic qualities, valuable in electrical industries. Hematite is available in larger quantities but contain less iron. Now, these are the major iron ore belts in India. The first one is between Orissa, Jharkhand, and they produce high quality hematite ore in these particular districts and mines. And the Durg, Bastar, Chandrapur belt, that is Durg and Bastar, are in Chhattisgarh, and Chandrapur is in Maharashtra. That belt, that area is good for hematite. And there's a range called Bailadilla range in Bastar. There are 14 deposits of very good quality hematite ore. And for extraction, we have the NMDC, National Mineral Development Corporation, set up by the government, and they do the work of extraction, testing, checking, and shipping. And a lot of ore from this mine goes to Japan and South Korea via Vishakhapatnam port. And this quality which is found here is very good for steel making. The third iron ore belt is Bellary, Chitradurga, Chikmagalur, and Tumkur in Karnataka. And Kudremukh mines on the Western Ghats are 100% EOU, stands for export oriented units. So whatever they extract, they are exporting it 100%. This is the one of the largest deposits of iron ore in the world, and ore is transported as slurry through a pipeline. That saves a lot of money and a lot of effort to a port near Mangaluru, and from there it is exported. The state of Goa and Ratnagiri district of Maharashtra have got this belt of Maharashtra Goa. It doesn't produce a very high quality ore, but the exploitation is very efficiently done. And iron ore is exported through Marmugao port in Goa. This is a slurry pipeline for transportation of iron slurry in Karnataka. This is iron ore being loaded onto a ship. The on the left hand side is crane like structure is a conveyor belt, and it's putting iron ore powder onto the ship. Manganese is also classified as a ferrous metal, and this is the reason is not because it has got qualities like iron, but because it's required for manufacturing of steel and ferromanganese alloy. 10 kilogram of manganese is required to manufacture 1 ton of steel. It's mixed with iron, carbon, and other compounds. And this is also used in manufacturing of bleaching powder during the process and insecticides and paints. And Odisha is a major largest producer of manganese ore in India, and it produces 1/3 of the country's ores. This is a manganese ore. We'll look at some non-ferrous minerals. India does not have very large reserves of non-ferrous minerals, but the important minerals are copper, bauxite, lead, zinc, and gold. Out of this, only two, the first two, copper and bauxite, are there in your syllabus, so you should know about them thoroughly. And these are important in metallurgy, engineering, and electrical industries. Copper is a reddish brown metal you find in the copper wires in your houses, and it has got a very good electrical conductivity. Better than that is silver, but silver is prohibitively expensive for household use. And copper is malleable, means you can beat it into sheets with a hammer. It is also ductile, that means you can pull it into long wires. These are the physical properties of copper. And India is critically deficient in this mineral. The reason is India is a big country and we have lot of consumption of this copper, and the supply is poor because the production is poor. We don't have that much of copper reserves. It is used in manufacturing of electrical cables, electronics, and chemical industries also because of the good properties of conductivity. There are mines in Balaghat known as Malaj Khand. There are mines called Khetri mines in Rajasthan, and in Singhbhum district in Jharkhand, there are again some copper mines, which are these three mines are the leading producers of copper in India. This is what a copper ore looks like. It's greenish in color. Now, this green color is because of, let's just look at this statue made up of copper. Uh, Air contains carbon dioxide and air contains moisture also. So moisture reacts with copper, forms copper hydroxide, and carbon dioxide reacts with copper, forms copper carbonate. So copper carbonate and copper hydroxide, when they form a complex, it forms this greenish color. Bauxite looks like a clay, and bauxite is converted into alumina through chemical processes. Alumina is aluminium oxide, so that is reduced to aluminium, and that is how aluminum metal is obtained. Now, bauxite is formed by the decomposition of rocks which are rich in aluminium silicates. Aluminum is strong and light, a good conductor, and also malleable. It's also ductile to some extent. Aluminum wires can be broken by hand, but still it's a good conductor. So, aluminum is an alternative to copper wires. Aluminum wires are alternative to copper wires, although the quality is not as good, but it is far cheaper than copper. The Amarkantak Plateau in Madhya Pradesh, the Michael Hills, and the plateau region of Bilaspur and Katni. Bilaspur is in Chhattisgarh, and Katni is in Madhya Pradesh. So that is the reason where bauxite is produced. Odisha is the largest bauxite producer, and Panchpat Mali in Koraput district has important bauxite deposits. This is what bauxite looks like before powdering. Just look at the nodules. Now, mica is a non-metallic mineral, and it has got sheet structure. Means there are mica is made up of transparent or translucent, very thin sheets. The sheets are so thin that if you place 1,000 of them, probably the thickness, total thickness, would be about 1 centimeter. And mica can be clear, or it can be black, or it can be green, yellow, red, brown, depending on other minerals present. Now it has got excellent dielectric strength and low power loss factor. It has got good insulating properties and good resistance to high flow of electricity of high voltage. That makes it very important mineral for the industries. Now the northern edge of Chota Nagpur Plateau from Koderma in Hazaribagh district and up to Hazaribagh town is an important belt in Jharkhand, and it's found also around Ajmer in Rajasthan and in Nellore in Andhra Pradesh. This is what the natural mica looks like. These are the sheet structures and translucence. But nowadays we also have artificial mica, which is cheaper and has got similar properties. The limestone is again an important rock mineral. It's found in association with rocks composed of calcium carbonate or calcium and magnesium carbonates. Now remember, this calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate causes the hardness of water. So if you happen to drink water and if you feel that taste is so strange and you're not able to quench your thirst, that's an hard water, and that may indicate the presence of limestone somewhere around. And it is found in sedimentary rocks of most geological formations. And limestone is a basic raw material for the cement industry and essential for smelting of iron ore in the blast furnace. Smelting is a process of extracting iron from iron ore. This is limestone. Now, the need for conservation of minerals is important for your examination also. And industries and agriculture have strong dependence on minerals. And just 1% of the Earth's crust has a volume of workable minerals. Workable means which you can mine and extract and purify and enrich and sell. And it took millions of years for minerals to form, and we consume them very rapidly. The rate of replenishment is infinitely small in comparison to the present rate of consumption. This makes mineral resources finite and non-renewable. So this is a non-renewable resource. And if we continue to extract ores, it will lead to increasing cost of extraction, as in that case the minerals will have to be extracted from greater depths, and you would have taken out all the good ones, so the not so good quality will be remaining, and to purify them the efforts will be similar or more, but the yield you will get is less, and that will again lead to the increase in cost. We need to use them in planned and sustainable manner, and we need technologies to use low grade ores at low cost because low grade ores, the cost of purifying is very high, so we don't have the technology to purify this low grade ores at low cost that is required. And recycling and substitutes are steps in conserving mineral resources for the future. If we can recycle a type of mineral, let us say iron is easily recyclable, iron, copper, aluminum, tin, zinc, they can be recycled easily. Instead of reinventing the wheel, it's better we use what is left, whatever we have, or we look for substitutes, something which can work almost as well as that mineral, and that's the substitute with some compromises. Energy is required. Now we're looking at the energy resources. We have seen the mineral resources. Energy is required for all activities, be it domestic, industrial, or in transportation. Everywhere we require energy, and this can be generated from fuel minerals like coal, petroleum, natural gas, uranium, thorium, and electricity. energy resources can be classified as conventional and or non-conventional. The major difference here is after you have taken out energy from the resource, if that resource is finished, if it is burnt or if it has changed its form, that is a conventional energy resource. If the form does not change or if it can be reused or it can be renewed, then that is a non-conventional energy resource. We'll look at it better in this chapter. Now, conventional energy resources, most of them are burned to obtain energy. That is firewood, cattle dung cake, coal, petroleum, natural gas, etc. And thermal electricity is produced by burning coal and generating steam and then moving turbines with that. So thermal electricity is a conventional energy source because something is being burnt there. Hydel or hydroelectricity is also considered as a conventional energy source, although coal or nothing else, no coal or natural gas is burned there. Still, we consider that as the conventional, the usual energy source. This is an hydroelectric dam. On the left hand side, you have the dam structure, the tall wall, and behind that is the collected water or the reservoir. We have the intake, which uh, makes the water flow at a slope and which moves a turbine, and the turbine moves a generator, the copper coils, and the magnet, and from there electricity is produced and distributed. Now let's look at the non-conventional energy resources. Uranium and thorium are not usually used. Usually, I'm saying uranium and thorium are not usually used for producing energy. So they are non-conventional energy sources. Although they are all, both of them are exhaustible. They can be finished. They finish. They change their form. They change into something else. They are used in chain reactions which release a large amount of energy, and these minerals are rare and exhaustible. This source of energy does not pollute the environment as much as the thermal energy produces because nothing is burnt here. They don't release any smoke. Solar energy, wind energy, tidal energy, geothermal energy, and biogas energy are some more non conventional types of energies. We'll be looking at them uh, in this chapter when we move there. And 70% of the energy in rural households come from firewood and cattle dung cakes. Even now, even though the cooking gas is so commonly available, and because we are a population of 135 crore people, and 70% of that becomes a good big number. That's environmentally important also. Now, here's what happens in the nuclear energy production. You have the nuclear reactor on the left, that orange cylinder. It has got fuel rods and control rods. The fuel rods are either thorium or uranium. They, they are the control rods are the ones which start the reaction, and heat is generated, which is used for heating water, and the steam that is produced is used for turning the turbines in a generator, and that produces electricity. We have only 6 nuclear power plants in India. We have Rawatbata in Rajasthan, we have Naroda in Uttar Pradesh, we have Kakrapada in Gujarat, we have Tarapur in Mumbai, we have Kaiga in Karnataka, and we have Kalpakkam in Tamil Nadu. Only 6 are there. Now, coal is a very important mineral for us. It's an important fuel mineral, and we have a good amount of coal, this fossil fuel available in India, and it is used for power generation and for domestic and industrial use. And India is very much depending on coal for its commercial energy requirements. That could be a minus point if we do not search for alternatives now when we still have the time. Coal is formed due to the compression of plant material over millions of years. And coal is available in a variety of forms. Let's look at some forms. We have on the left hand side, we have peat. They look like dung cakes. They are also wet, but in spite of their wetness, they burn very well. Only thing is they smoke a lot. We have lignite. It's a brown colored coal of not very high quality. Now about quality, let me tell you one thing, that the main purpose of coal is to provide thermal energy. So the main reason why we extract coal is to burn it. Now, when we burn something, it produces heat. So there is a term known as calorific value. Calorific value means the amount of energy produced for a unit quantity of fuel. That is, if you burn 1 gram of coal, how much heat it will produce? That's the layman's definition. So, according to that, we have coals of different qualities. Secondly, what are the other things found in the same fuel? For example, if sulfur is here, when we burn it will form sulfur dioxide and that will pollute the air. If nitrogen in some other form is there, it will form nitrogen dioxide. So this SO2 and NO2, also in scientific terms they are known as SOx and NOx. They are contributing to the environment pollution, the air pollution. So that is also important when we are considering the quality of coal. So lignite is a low grade brown coal which is soft with high moisture content. So when you start burning it, it's going to fume a lot. It's going to smoke a lot. And the principal lignite reserves are in Neyveli in Tamil Nadu. There's a company called Neyveli Lignite Limited, and that's for generation of electricity. And coal that has been buried deep and subjected to a lot of temperature and pressure is known as the bituminous coal. This is bituminous coal. It's black colored, and it is the most popular coal in commercial use. Now, if there is a high grade bituminous coal, that is, if the calorific value is high and the impurity level is less, and the ash, the matter which does not convert into carbon dioxide and doesn't convert into energy, if that matter is less, that is less ashing is there, that kind of coal is known as metallurgical coal. It is nothing but very good quality bituminous coal. Just keep this in mind. And this metallurgical coal is used in blast furnaces for smelting of iron. Then we have a very hard type of coal. It is known as anthracite. It's the best quality coal, very high calorific value, and very high cost also. So somewhere we have to, in a thermal power plants, we have to compromise on the quality. So we use either bituminous or we use lignite. We don't use peat. Peat is formed in swampy and boggy areas. So that is the reason of their wetness. Now, India has coal which has occurred in two geological ages. You can have a look at these slides about peat and lignite and bituminous and anthracite, but I've already covered that. Additional is the carbon content in anthracite, which is very high, between 80 and 95%. These are the coal producing areas of the country. You can see that the Indian subcontinent is sloping towards the right hand side, that is towards the Bay of Bengal. And since coal is found in sedimentary layers, that is why the sedimentary layers are more likely to form because of the sloping. And as expected, we have a lot of coal mines in the right hand side of the country. These are the 17 names, different places where the coal is produced in India. Now, occurrence of coal in India is like this. It occurs in rock series of Gondwana geological age, that is the olden times, that is 200 million years ago, and the tertiary deposits are relatively recent, that is 55 million years ago. And Gondwana coal is of metallurgical grade because of the longer duration of compression and high pressure. And such coal can be obtained in the Damodar River Valley, that is between West Bengal and Jharkhand. And Bokaro, Jharia, and Raniganj are important mines, the coal fields for the metallurgical grade coal. Also, there are some deposits like this in Godavari, Mahanadi, Son, and Vardha River valleys. The tertiary coals, that is the newer coals, they occur in the northeastern states of Meghalaya, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, and Nagaland. Remember that coal is bulky, so usually we find wherever the coal production is there, the industries which are utilizing the coal are also nearby, because then that the cost of transportation is saved. One example is Singrauli in Madhya Pradesh. The coal mines are there, and also the power plants are there, the private power plants as well as of the central government, that is NTPC, National Thermal Power Corporation. They are located nearby. Now we look at the petroleum, also known as mineral oil, and after coal, this is the next major energy source in India. It not just provides us with fuel, but also lubricants and raw materials for a number of manufacturing industries. And petroleum refineries, they act like nodal industry for synthetic textile, fertilizer, and several chemical industries, because a lot of products these uh, industries they require from a petroleum industry. Not just the petroleum, but the byproducts also are important. Now, the occurrence of petroleum. Don't worry about the terms like anticlines. I'm going to explain to you shortly in the next slide only. These are petroleum, the occurrence is associated with anticlines and fault traps in the rock formation of the tertiary age. Tertiary age is the new age, 55 million years. Now, petroleum occurs where oil is trapped in the crest of the upfold. This also I'll explain in the next slide. And the oil bearing layer is a porous limestone or sandstone through which oil is able to flow, and oil is prevented from rising or sinking by intervening non porous layers. So let's understand this. Let's first understand what is anticline and what is syncline. On the surface of land, or sometimes it's buried under the soil, if there is a crest, if there's a rising, it is known as anticline. If there's a falling or if there's a trough, that is a syncline. Now here in this cross section of the soil, we have the source rock, that is a non-porous rock over which the oil is accumulated, and there is a porous reservoir rock through which oil can permeate. And on top of that is another impermeable rock. So you have a sandwich of source rock which is impermeable, and a shale rock on the top, that is green color, again impermeable, and between them there is a porous layer of porous rock. And if you see this curvature of this gray layer, that is the anticline we were talking about, and between that is trapped the rock oil or the petroleum oil. And often natural gas is associated with it, because gas is in gaseous form. It is found above the oil, but it is not compulsory for natural gas to be present only with petroleum. There are places where natural gas has been struck, but petroleum is not there. Now, this is a fault. If there is a layer of rock which has climbed above another layer, and there's a fracture here, in such places also we have similar structure of rocks, and here also it's possible to find petroleum. Now these are the major producers of petroleum in India, although After this production, also we have to depend on the Middle East for some of our requirements. We have Mumbai High or Bombay High producing 63% of the petroleum total production, and there's a place called Ankaleshwar in Gujarat which produces 18%, and there's a very old well in Assam. There are several wells there in Digboi, that is the oldest one, and Nahar Katia and Moran Hug region, and together they produce some 16% of the annual petroleum requirement of India, annual production of India. This is a photograph of the Bombay High oil rigging platform. This is a park in Digboi in Assam. This was commissioned in the year 1989 when the Digboi well completed 100 years. There's an interesting story. There was a railway line being laid in Dibrugarh, and there was an engineer, a British man known as Lake, W.L. Lake. He noticed that the elephants which were being used for the railway line construction work, their feet was covered with mud, and the mud was wet and it smelled like oil. Then on investigating, he found that that was indeed oil, and they went for exploring. That was in the year 1882, and when they found oil, they told the local people, "Dig, boy, dig more." And at the depth of 56 meters, they found the reserve of oil. So, because of this dig boy, the name Dig Boy came. That is the story behind the name. Natural gas is found in association with or without petroleum. It is a source of energy as well as industrial raw material in petrochemical industry, just like petroleum was. And it is environment friendly because of low carbon dioxide emission. Most of it gets burnt, and that is the reason. Now, occurrence of natural gases in the Krishna Godavari river basin at Mumbai High or Bombay High, Gulf of Cambay, Andaman and Nicobar Islands also. The main users for the natural gas are the power sector and the fertilizer industry sector. There's something similar known as CNG, that is compressed natural gas, and it's gaining popularity as a clean fuel, the green fuel for vehicles in India. You already have auto rickshaws and some places buses also. The public buses are run with CNG. Now, after production of electricity, whether it is from hydroelectricity generation method or the thermal method or the nuclear method, the quality of electricity is the same. Now, in hydroelectricity, I showed you that diagram where a fast flowing water is made to rotate turbines and electricity is produced. We have multi-purpose uh, projects like Bakra Nangal. We have Damodar Valley Corporation and Kopili Idle Power Project, which are producers of hydroelectricity. We have thermal electricity, that is, first you use either coal or petroleum or natural gas and heat water, produce steam, and with that steam you use for turning the turbines and then production of electricity. Such power stations use non-renewable fossil fuels. There are some 310 thermal power plants in India. A lot of privately owned plants are also there. Now, what is the need for non-conventional sources of energy? India has a rising population. We are already 135 crore plus people now, and by 2025 we will be overtaking China in population. We have a simultaneous rising consumption of electricity. We have a growing demand, and we also have a growing economy. We are a developing country, so naturally our energy requirement is high. But at the same time, the cost of production of oil and gas is also getting higher and higher, and the supply is getting lesser and lesser, and it's also causing problem to the environment. Uh, and this makes the need for alternative sources of energy important. This is an important question for you for examination. Just remember this. A lot of scope for non-conventional resources of energy in India is present, and some of that we have exploited. Most of it we are yet to do. So the renewable sources of energy or the non-conventional sources of energy are solar energy, wind energy, tidal energy, biomass, and energy from waste materials. We have lot of sunlight in our country for the major part of the year. We have good wind and water and biomass. That is the reason why we have several programs to develop these non-conventional sources of energy. Now, this is what happens in a nuclear power plant. You remember the control rods and the fuel rods. Now, the bigger ball on the left, the second number ball from the left, that is uranium, the isotope 235. If this is bombarded with the neutron came from the control rods. So this will split into krypton, which is a noble element, noble gas, and barium. And two neutrons will be released. This is known as the first neutron generation. Now these neutrons will again hit two atoms of uranium 35, 235, this one and this one. And again it will produce krypton and barium. And two more neutrons will be released. And this production is on a second neutron generation. And this will keep on happening. As long as all the uranium 235 is exhausted, this will keep on happening, and in every step a lot of energy is released, and that is the source of nuclear energy. Now this will be easier for you to understand. This is nuclear energy or atomic energy is obtained by altering the structure of atoms, and much energy is released in the process in the form of heat. This heat is used to generate electric power through heating of water producing of steam. And uranium and thorium are available in Jharkhand and the Aravalli ranges of Rajasthan. And there's a type of sand known as monazite sand in Kerala, which is rich in thorium. Monazite is the ore for thorium. Thorium is a radioactive element just like your uranium. Now this is monazite sand in Kerala. Look at the color of the sand. This is radioactive sand, and on the left hand side, this is one crystal of monazite, which is the mineral for thorium. Now, talking about solar energy, India gets a lot of sunlight for the major part of the year. The reason is we are a tropical country. And the photovoltaic technology converts sunlight into electricity. And nowadays we have cheap solar panels available. The only expense is of the inverter and the batteries, and that is small. Just the setup cost is high. That's all. Because you later on, you after 5 6 years 10 years, depending on the life of the battery, you have to only change the batteries. Some large solar power plants are being established in different parts of India, and they will minimize the dependence of rural household on firewood. This is the motto of that. This will contribute to environmental conservation and supply of manure also for agriculture. Now, instead of putting manure in the field, we are using manure for making cow dung cakes and burning them. This is an example of a private solar power plant. This is in Tamil Nadu, and it is owned by the Adani Group, and it's on a large piece of land, and this produces 648 megawatts of electricity. 648 megawatts is 648 million watts of electricity. The LED bulb that you use in your house is about 15 watt, not we were talking about million watts, 648 million watts. Now, wind energy, India still has hills and plains which get a lot of winds all throughout the years. And once set up, the wind energy harvesting does not incur much cost. Just the usual maintenance cost is there. The largest wind farm cluster is located in Tamil Nadu, from Nagarcoil to Madurai. And there are other areas which are important in wind farms, that is Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Gujarat, Kerala, Maharashtra, Lakshadweep, some in Rajasthan also, and some in Madhya Pradesh also, between Bhopal and Indore. Now, this is between Nagarcoil and Madurai. This is one wind farm. Now, when anything is decomposing, any organic matter, if it is allowed to decompose, it will liberate, release gases also. Now, this decomposition of organic matter yields gases, and if it is done in absence of oxygen, it will also produce gases such as methane, which can be burnt very easily. Methane, propane. Now, these gases has uh, higher thermal efficiency when you compare them to kerosene or dung cake and charcoal. Also, they are cleaner because they don't smoke as much as kerosene. They do not release vapors of kerosene, and they do not cause burning of eyes because of the smoke of dung cake and charcoal. For the purpose of manufacturing biogas, biogas plants are set up at different levels. It can be at municipal level or cooperative level, even individual level. And what you put in that is the shrubs, the cattle dung, the farm waste, etc., which are organic in nature and can be decomposed. They are allowed to decompose here, and this yields good quality manure also as a byproduct. Now, this is a biogas plant. You can see it's very big. This must be using tons of biomass every day. And for people who keep cattle in their house, they can go for a smaller portable biogas plant such as this. Maybe just a few kilograms of dung is put here. You know that we have high tides and low tides, and that is because of the gravitational pull of the moon on the ocean waters. So, when in a high tide, the water comes in towards the shores of the sea, and in low tide, it goes away from the shore of the sea. When there's a high tide, in this method of tidal energy making, the water is trapped. There are gates which are opened when the high tide comes, and when the high tide is fully there, the gates are closed. So when the tide falls away, the water which is trapped is allowed to stay inside, and they are released uh, uh, at a time, and they pass through pipes, and because of that, the flow of the water to the pipes, they move turbines and produce electricity. We are not fully doing it, but the Gulf of Khambat, the Gulf of Kutch, and Sundarban Delta region have got the potential for this. Now, without building the gates, this is one more system of using the tidal energy. There are propeller like things below the water level, and above the water level are the turbines. Now, just like there's a lapse rate when you rise up higher in the atmosphere, for every 165 feet, there's a temperature drop of 1 degree Celsius. Similarly, when you go deeper and deeper in the soil, when you dig deeper and deeper, there is hotter and hotter temperature, higher and higher temperature. Sometimes the geothermal gradient is high, and you find these high temperatures at shallow depths. So groundwater there becomes hot and rises to the surface, and because it's hot, it also starts steaming, and this steam is used for driving turbines and generate electricity. We have Parvati Valley in Himachal Pradesh and Puga Valley in Ladakh. which are producing electricity from the geothermal energy. Diagrammatically, it's like this. We have the underground reservoirs and the hot water, and we have the production well, transfer phase, producing high speed steam under high pressure is important, and that is used to move the turbines and generate electricity. This is one such plant. This belongs to NTPC, that is National Thermal Power Corporation, and this is a new plant which is coming up in Chhattisgarh. Now, the conservation of energy resources. Energy is a basic requirement for economic development, and energy input is needed for every economic sector, let it be agriculture or industry, transportation, commercial as well as domestic. You name it, we everywhere we require energy. We cannot imagine life without energy now. And India has increasingly required more and more energy to keep its developmental plans operational. We are a developing country and we will be developing very well in the coming days. And for that, we will require a lot of energy. Now, as a result, consumption of energy in all forms has been steadily rising. So, we urgently need a sustainable path of energy development. And promoting energy conservation using renewable energy sources can provide us with sustainable energy. This can be our answer for the future. India needs to become more energy efficient and we need to be more judicious in its use. And we can do our own bit. Suppose we are not using the energy, switch it off. You can switch it off on once again when you need it. But also remember that for the energy that you are using in your house, if it is even if it is electrical energy, there's coal burning somewhere else. So if you and for that for burning of coal, a lot of water is also being used for generating steam. So just the action of switching a switch off when not required. By doing that, you're saving that much of coal and that much of water also. This may seem like a small matter to you, but do you know? Sometimes we switch off the TV with the remote, and that small red LED is still visible burning on the television set. Only that much of energy multiplied by the number of households in India. To keep that red light on, we require one full power plant, one full mega size power plant we require just for that red light, that tiny red light. Imagine that and remember that. This is the end of the chapter. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And especially the last part, our conservation of energy, is as important from the point of view of examination.